So today we'll go over the most important things you should know before buying and playing Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, biggest gameplay features and also changes from the first game. This way, no matter if you're a complete newbie or somebody who sank hundreds of hours in the first one, you'll get a good understanding of what this game does differently. Also, to celebrate the launch, I'm opening up a brand new giveaway for Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 on all platforms. You just have to be a subscriber of the channel, leave a like on the video and comment down below. It only takes a couple of seconds and the winner will be announced a couple of days before the game launches. That being said, let's get started with the biggest combat changes. If you're like me, you likely dismissed the game at first, thinking that it may be too difficult to get into the combat. Well, let me assure you that's totally not the case. First of all, combat has been refined with many new animations, feels way more responsive, and after 50 hours in Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, I can definitely confirm it also greatly rewards you for being highly aggressive, without losing any of its more grounded methodical touch. Many of the combos and skills from the first game make a return, but there's plenty of new ones as well. And yes, Riposte and Master Strike are still there and just as powerful as ever, especially if you like sword fighting. Plus, there's a neat tutorial at the start of the game that teaches you pretty much all the basics you need. Second of all, you can use taunts and shouts now in combat, and there's even a perk that makes your shouts to give you a very strong damage buff.
You've no chance against me! Die, you wretch!
So now you can actually curse and shout at your enemy and essentially psych yourself up like a madman while clobbering any poor bastard who dares to cross your way. Third of all, we've got new weapons, and even existing weapons also got new attack moves. So now, for example, we get crossbows as a new devastating ranged alternative to the previous bow and arrow, very precise and also very high damage. We also get guns. This is the point in history where primitive firearms were first introduced in Europe, and while not typically common, they can be highly deadly once you get them. At number 2, let's talk about the brand new alchemy feature and the blacksmithing minigame, because in Kingdom Come 2, when you brew potions via alchemy or craft gear via blacksmithing, you're quite literally doing just that. As in, grab the source material like a piece of steel, fire up the forge, hit the iron while it's hot, and then shape it with the hammer. And the same goes for alchemy. You pull up the plants, mix them in different proportions with different substances to get the potions that you need, like healing, poisons, buffs, seeing in the dark, and even the save game potion is one of them. The attention to detail here is insane, and following the instruction properly will determine the outcome of the item you create. So you can create much better versions of the same potion if you follow proper proportions, and the same goes with the weapon. You can create much better options if you get the blacksmithing on point. But the game never locks you out of these anyway. You can always find, buy, or even steal many of these items if you prefer to do that instead. This brings us to number 3, to the new crime and punishment system, because committing any crime such as stealing, breaking into houses, harming people or domestic animals and so on will have different consequences depending on their severity. And even if you don't get caught red-handed right away, that doesn't mean you're in the clear just yet. NPCs aren't completely dumb and they can definitely make the connection. For example, if you're seen lingering in a place that's been recently robbed, or if you walk around covered in blood following a crime. It's not as restrictive as Red Dead Redemption 2, for example, if you ever played that, but it's still quite complex nonetheless. Now, if you do get caught or if you surrender, at this point there are a few outcomes. Typically, you can just pay the fine and move along, or if your speech and charisma are high enough, you can just talk your way out of most situations. But if you fail at doing that or accept your punishment, then there are even more severe consequences for it. For example, you can get caned or even spend a few days in the pillory as a punishment with all the ensuing public humiliation, which will also apply long-lasting debuffs on you that will affect your stats, your regeneration for HP and even stamina, plus your reputation with the townfolk. However, more severe acts like unaliving somebody can get you branded, and repeat offenses will eventually lead to, you guessed it, getting executed, as in you will be brought to the gallows and pretty much hanged for the crimes you committed, which I find to be a very nice realistic touch. Anyway, jumping to the new regions, we get 2 of them in 2 separate maps. We have the starting Trotsky region with the Trotsky Castle and all the nearby villages, and then Gutenberg that you get to travel to a bit later. So in total, that's going to be roughly twice the size of that from the first game, with Gutenberg being the much larger region. But it's also going to, of course, feature the first full-blown city, which looks really awesome from the previews so far. I can't really show you the map size because of embargo reasons, but the devs showcased a small preview of its minimap right here. And let me tell you, that was big enough on its own already, but it's still a very small fraction of the overall Gutenberg map, which is going to be much larger than this. Talking purely about game time, I spent at least 30 to 40 hours in the first region of Trotsky alone because I wanted to check everything. On that note, I also want to talk about the quest design here. While my experience with the first game is rather limited, for the sequel, I can definitely say that quests felt very dynamic and there is a lot of freedom in how you choose to approach them and even finish them. At least a good chunk of them, that is. Not all of them, but I felt that the majority of the side quests I've completed had different endings depending how involved I was while completing them. And sometimes missing a crucial detail could bring a whole different outcome. Like for example, siding with one character or another, solving or amplifying a conflict, all the way to influencing the outcome of follow-up quests. And in many situations, the game even offers different routes to reach similar conclusions. And in most of these situations, you can choose to get involved more, analyze all aspects, even do a lot of investigation work, talk to NPCs or convince them in one way or another to uncover all of the things and extra objectives that you need to fully finish those quests with the best possible outcome for you. Or you can rush through them if you want to, ignore everything and just go with whichever outcome you want, but maybe also suffer the consequences later down the line, because you're going to interact with many of these NPCs in future missions too, which may or may not influence that as well. Now, while on the subject of story and plot, Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 takes place right after the events of the first game, although the developers mentioned it's not necessary to know the first game to fully enjoy the sequel. And after spending like 50 plus hours so far with it, I can definitely agree with that. Like I said in my preview a couple of days back, I didn't finish the first game either, and I didn't find much friction going straight into Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. If anything, I really appreciate all the quality of life changes now even more after I went back to the first game and tried it out again. In terms of the plot, its tone is definitely darker than before, and it's likely that the much better cinematics this time around help a ton with that. Plus the fact that the game looks gorgeous, especially out in the open world. However, the best motion capturing for faces and like facial animations is definitely reserved to these cutscenes. Speaking of looking more alive, at number 8, NPCs are more alive than ever. In fact, the world feels more alive than ever, for a few reasons. First of all, NPCs still have a 24-hour schedule, which means that during the day you're going to typically find them at their jobs, like farming, running shops, blacksmithing and whatnot, but they aren't completely stuck into place either. In my experience, I've seen them doing a whole bunch of stuff, like going into town, talking to other folks, going in and doing different jobs as well, like at 1 hour doing gardening and then going in to repair some structures, but others can definitely be stuck in place for long periods of time. Outside of towns, you will see merchants with carts going around, but also bandit ambushes and even NPCs in need of help. Plus, of course, all the hunting spots and all the predators that can hunt you down, but mostly that's reserved to wolves. Oftentimes, when traveling, you'll see people getting robbed, or even you yourself will get ambushed, case in which you either have the option to flee or to fight. But you may also find folks being attacked by wolves, beggars, or even injured NPCs requesting aid. All of these and more are a possibility when going out in the wild. And speaking of the wilds, at number 9, we also have to talk about the existing survival elements. Of course, a lot of them are making a return, and stuff like eating, sleeping, getting injured, and cleaning yourself and your gear will obviously play a huge role into this game. The immediate effect of not eating or sleeping, or getting drunk for that matter, will usually impair your vision. Meanwhile, more serious injuries can affect stats, HP and stamina levels, all the way to impairing your movement if you break a leg, for example. Meanwhile, being extremely dirty or covered in a lot of blood will affect how others perceive you, including outcomes of dialogues too. But not all of these will have a negative implication. For example, if you are covered in blood, you will appear more intimidating, so this can definitely help solve matters quicker, especially if you just want to resort to a bit of violence or to threatening a few NPCs to divulge their secrets. Now, besides that, there are a few more things I want to cover quickly. Similarly to the first game, the save potions are going to be back, but it's much easier to get a hold of them. First of all, at the start of the game, you get like 20 or 25. Plus, they are quite abundant because you can both craft them via the new alchemy and also buy or steal them from merchants and other NPCs. And on top of that, you also have sleeping in your own bed and safe exiting, which will continue to save your game just fine. At number 11, lots of new animations for most actions instead of black screens, plus very few loading screens at all. Like pretty much the only loading screens you will have is when you start the game up, when you skip time, or when you go from one region to the other. And that is basically it. Everything else feels much more refined when you interact with objects, like washing your face, entering dialogues, going into mini games. It all feels like there's fewer black screens in the 50 hours of Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 I had so far compared to the first hour of the first Kingdom Come, just to put it into perspective. Which brings us to the completion time. At number 12, it's been reported that the game takes roughly 100 hours to fully finish, including all the side content, and I tend to agree. Like I said, just the first map of Trotsky required about 40 hours or so to fully go through everything for me. And there's lots of dialogues, cutscenes, many possible outcomes to test out, plus the second, much bigger region of Gutenberg. And that is just what we get with the base game. There's likely going to be a lot more in terms of DLCs and expansions, and it's likely going to follow a similar route to that of the first game. We know from the Gold Edition and the separate expansion pass that there are at least 3 upcoming expansions planned for Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. So expecting new quests, new characters, maybe even new areas to explore, as well as a whole bunch of new unlockable content and maybe even gear. Which brings us to the last and final point, graphics and system requirements. You can of course see all of them right here. So a 4080 is enough to let you play at 1440p 60 fps or 4K 30, but on a 4090, which is the one that I played, it's going to be even better. I was playing 4040p and easily breaking 100 plus fps even in the super dense forest areas. And yeah, that's pretty much it with the video. Let me know down below if you're also excited for Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, or if you're not, also express your opinions down below or take part in the giveaway. You're free to do any of these. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.